We want to bring up, for the purposes of seconding, we're going to do a couple of them. But the first one, I'm really pleased to introduce to you a lady from Burlington, Erin McCall Goldie. She's a working mom. She's an advocate for kids with craniofacial conditions and the founder of FACE, Families Advancing Craniofacial Excellence. And she and Chris are very good friends. Please welcome Erin McCall Goldie.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am so proud and privileged to be here tonight to support Chris Murphy. I know from personal experience what a dedicated and effective voice Chris is for the people who really need him. In 2001, my son Connor was born with a craniofacial difference known as a cleft lip and cleft palate. This is where the two sides of the face is not fused together, leaving a large separation in the mouth and nose area. In Connecticut, approximately 40 to 50 live births a year will result in a cleft child. Over 4,500 children in the state have been diagnosed with some type of craniofacial condition from birth defects, disease, or trauma. In 2002, I began working with other families to ensure that their children's craniofacial differences receive treatment through their family health care plan. Surprisingly, not all health care plans provided the necessary coverage for craniofacial reconstructive procedures. I approached Chris Murphy, who had recently been appointed chair of the Public Health Committee, to ask for his assistance in creating a health care bill that would provide orthodontic insurance coverage for craniofacial children. Not only did Chris listen compassionately to our needs, he immediately and enthusiastically joined us in our fight. That year, Chris was very instrumental in assisting creating Senate Bill No. 1, which forced insurance companies to provide coverage for orthodontic processes for craniofacial children. Chris worked for craniofacial families night and day, constantly fighting for our rights for our children. That year, Senate Bill 1 was signed and the law went into effect. Thanks to Chris, Connecticut children with craniofacial differences can now receive treatment that they need. Unfortunately, the state could not solve the entire insurance issue. Self-funded insurance companies do not have to follow state mandates, therefore leaving craniofacial children without coverage for surgery. Right now in Congress, the Reconstructive Surgery Act has been introduced. If passed, this act would make it mandatory for all insurance plans to provide coverage for reconstructive surgeries. I immediately contacted my representative in Congress, Nancy Johnson. Well, let me tell you, I wrote letters, I called her office, I faxed things over, and she ignored me. I didn't hear one thing from her office. Unlike Chris, she did not fight for my child's rights. She ignored me so much that I never even received a courtesy call from anyone in her office, more or less her. Of course, we know where she might have been. I am sad to say that many parents of craniofacial children receive the same silent treatment from Mrs. Johnson. Families cannot afford to be silent. They can't afford that. The needs of the community cannot be ignored. We cannot have a representative in Congress, such as Nancy Johnson, to pick and choose issues that may be only of importance to her. It is time for a change, and I'm sure all of you agree. It's time to have a representative in Congress who will provide a voice and fight for the rights of the people in the community. It is time to elect Chris Murphy. I know that Chris will provide a strong voice for us, for our children, and for our state. I am honored to second the nomination of Chris Murphy for the office of the United States Representative for the 5th Congressional District.